Uh-oh.
Yes, I never heard that before.
Uh-oh.
So that was really ominous. So welcome everyone to the Artist Talk with Greg Wilbur and Michael DeForest for the Oblations show at the Waterstone Gallery. And before we even dive in, there is an oblation for the Oblations show in the form of a poem that Michael penned. Michael, would you like to read this poem for us as sort of a ritual opening?
Okay. Um, Material hand struck into an offering, stirred by a breath, a vision, accidental meeting of different notions. A moment converted to sound, word, movement, line, paint, object. A promise of exchange, sight, touch, emotion. These are our offerings.
Thank you.
So that came from the idea of art as something that people who create it put out there to share with the world. We can have all these ideas about things in our heads, but if we don't make them real in the real world, we're not really truly sharing them. So I thought of our work, not necessarily just in this show, but our work as our offerings, to be hopefully appreciated, but at least shared with others, and that there might be some sort of communication.
And I know if you've been to the show, anyone, if you come into the gallery, you'll see how beautifully they enmesh, but not because they match per se, but you describe it well in your third line there. It's an accidental meeting of different notions.
Yep.
And I think you're both clearly coming from different directions, but maybe arriving at a similar place. I noticed that even in the scale of your work, especially yours, Michael, which I've only ever seen photographed before witnessing it in person. And you work in such a large scale. It's really
yeah, well, that comes from being a furniture maker. So furniture can be nice and small, like the size of a box, a jewelry box, or it can be as large as a conference table or some sort of reception furniture, and anywhere in between. So I've always had an interest in scale. With my art, I have recently, within the last 10 to 13 years, been exposed to large functional sculpture. And that's really influenced my work a lot.
Gets in there, doesn't it?
Yes,
and have you, Greg, you two showing together really sings. Have you guys done this before?
We have. I think I think we've done 4 postcards, haven't we, Michael?
Wow. Three, I think.
3 or 4 shows together, yeah. That came out of kind of how Waterstone is working right now, our gallery. We have 15 members, I think that's right, and we probably will increase it a few more. So the way it works is each one of us gets a show at least a year apart, and sometimes 2 years. You can kind of pick that. And Michael and I wanted to show together, and we wanted to show, yearly, and the only way you can really do that at Waterstone is show with somebody else.
I see.
That's what we've done. And both of us, our work takes a long time to do. So
yeah.
A year is working a lot, which that's a good thing. And it prompts us to work, deadlines. And I pretty much try to show what I've done for a year, and I'm not that centered on particular ideas. I kind of just go at it, and if I see a scrap of big scrap of copper or brass or silver on the floor, and said, oh, I could do this with it, and that's where I'll go. Now, in this picture we got here going now, the green forms there. There's 10 of them, and I just started one form. I liked it, and I said I'll do a whole bunch of them, and that sort of relates to the pandemic and a pod, where people are, at least some people are thinking that if I'm going to be in contact with family and I'm with them all the time and we're careful, then maybe we won't get the COVID. So
Is the pod era.
yeah.
And similarly, on a maybe, I'm guessing, Michael, on a kind of a quarantine vibe, I noticed that your work is constructed of obvious fragments, and that there's, you know, things are made of pieces and pieced together, and then those pieces form an alphabet for other things to be made, which also kind of reminds me of the fragmentation experienced in these times. I don't know if that's where you're coming from, but that's what I'm picking up.
So this is the first piece that I ornamented and then cut around the ornamentation into parts and then sewed it back together. It was for a show called Dysfunction. So the idea was to, it was a wood show, predominantly wood show. And the idea was to somehow reference function, or at least show the opposite, the dysfunction of something. But the emphasis being design, the emphasis being making a sculpture, something beautiful. At that time, I had been thinking, well, one, of sutures, because I had a self-inflicted wound that cut a artery, and an amazing hand surgeon
What did you do?
put my artery back together, and this is sort of an honorarium to that, or to that skilled person. So this shows the parts after I've cut them apart, painted them, and then polished them, and then they're ready to be sewn back together.
And
that was the first part of the series. And then if you want to go to the next image, then I decided, well, let's see, I created a form, which was the bowl. I put an image on the inside. I cut out around the image. Well, this one I wanted to do a sculpture, a figurative sculpture. And what, you can go to the next picture. What I did was I just screwed blocks of wood together. So the first thing, I had the bowl was a whole shape, and I put decoration in it, and then I cut it apart. Well, the sculpture, the bust, I started with blocks. And if you can go down to another one. So this shows the blocks kind of pixelated, a ziggurat of the form. And I knew that I was going to find the form somewhere inside that. So I sculpted that. Once I got the finished sculpture, then I unscrewed everything, cut out the core on the inside, and finished them, and came up with that.
Wow.
So the nose itself is a pull for a drawer. So that center piece is not attached. Everything else is sewn together. So from that, I went to another process where I wanted to create forms of vessels, some, plates, bowls, platters, but I had no idea what the parts were going to be from. So if you continue down, these are all examples of vessels that came from a sculpture of the human form. So go to the next image. I made a small maquette of a torso, and I needed to blow it up to 1.5 scale because I wanted parts off of this sculpture that I could use to make forms. And the scale of the forms had to be human. I didn't want to make tiny things. I wanted to make large things. So I took this small maquette, sliced it up, go to the next one, and then I transposed each slice to a larger piece of foam. Basically, I'm just multiplying the shape by, I don't know how many times, like 8 or 9 times. Go on to the next one. And you can see that on the left is the maquette. Well, on the right is the same thing up to the waist in foam. Okay, and the next step. Next step is I've got the whole thing, again, zigguratted like the bust, sculpted that, and the next image shows the model that I worked with, an amazing person. She was a collaborator on this piece. She had all kinds of great ideas. Go on to the next one. And so after I sculpted the foam, I covered everything with 1/4 to 1/2 inch of clay. And go to the next one. Then once it was all, the clay was all formed, I covered everything with paper with the intention of, I'm trying to create compound curves that I can translate into wood. And paper was the perfect medium to see how far I could stretch each shape. Once the shape wanted to either fold together or tear apart, I cut the shape so that it laid consistently or contiguously on the surface, and then went to the next piece and the next piece until the entire surface was covered. So go back one more. Okay, so we have this form wherever 2 pieces of paper joined, and now go to the next one. I sliced through those joints and buried in a little dam, a little piece of, well, actually cardstock that had been waxed. So it's relatively thick paper, but it raised up from the surface of the clay, about, in most cases, about 1 inch at most. Okay, go to the next. So the entire thing, go to the next one. So now I'm starting to put plaster onto the sculpture into those spaces that were created by the dam. Go on to the next one until I have every one that I want. So there are spaces in there, and I decided to leave those as kind of an abstracted continuation of the form. So there are these holes, and you're going to be able to see inside the form, the torso, but your eye fills in all those spaces. Go on to the next one. Same thing with the back. And then the next picture shows a close-up of one of the plaster forms. And I take that out, go to the next one, turn it upside down, wrap the whole thing with wide, like 1.5 or 2 inch masking tape to create a barrier, and pour in a liquid polyester mold making or form making material. So go to the next one, pour it in, go to the next one. It hardens, it has a resin hardener in it, and then go to the next one. So this is after the tape is taken off, and then this is the form that I'm going to use to bend wood to make these compound curved forms. Okay, go to the next. From that form, I again use paper, lay it over the top, trace it. Okay, go to the next one. And I use the paper as a template on layers of veneer. So these are either 4 or 5 layers of veneer, I forget which. And I just use the paper as a drawing template. And then I have a router with a very small bit, 1/16 of an inch bit, and I just by hand route around it, and I've got 4 or 5 layers of veneer that I can use to bend on the bluish form. Go to the next one. So here are the pieces of veneer. I've got some hard resin glue that when you laminate wood in thin veneers, this plastic resin glue dries very hard. It does not flex. It's kind of brittle, in fact. So it holds the shape. So go on to the next one. So this is the veneer. 4 pieces are glued together and then they're taped to the form. Go to the next one. And that shows the how the veneer is attached to the form. Go to the next one. And I use a vacuum bag. Atmospheric pressure is about 17 pounds per square inch. You take all the air out of some sort of flexible container, like a big plastic bag. You're putting on these glued up veneers on the bending form. You're putting 17 pounds per square inch on the surface of the veneer, and that makes it conform to the polyester blue form. Okay, go to the next one. So this is inside the bag, and you can see all those wrinkles. That's just how the bag comes together, but it's smooth right around the veneer that I'm bending to the form. Go ahead to the next one. And you get a piece of veneer that is now, the glue is dry and it holds the form, and then go to the next. And that dead center, it says right lower front hip. That's the piece I was looking for to put back into the torso. Well, the torso now becomes the raw material. Go to the next image. Go to the next, there you go. Nope. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Go back. Yeah, right, yeah. So this shows the torso all taped, or not taped, but sewn together, and the back of it sewn together. And the piece that I showed you earlier is in the left lower to mid section of the torso. Okay, now go to the next picture. But I kept taking parts off of the torso to make forms and shapes like this. Okay, go to the next one. And you can see where there was a hole, that's a belly button in the center. And then down around the crotch area, it was open. I sewed across those to continue the form. Okay, go to the next one. That shows a better image of the piece. And then I made other pieces, like this is a vase, a bud vase, small, long flowers can be put in there. And then go to the next one. And then next one. And then this is just a bowl, a container. Go ahead, next one. And then the very last one. And this is just a collection of forms and vessels that I was able to make with the pieces off of the torso. So the whole idea of segments to me is exciting because they're individual pieces. I think of humans as made up of individual pieces. And once they're pulled together in whatever way, whether it's in a concrete way with sutures, or in a sort of ephemeral way in a brain or a mind that brings different segments together to make a human who they are stronger as a group. When I'm sewing these things together, until the last piece is locked in, the form just is flimsy. It moves. It doesn't really hold its shape. But once that last piece is locked in, the structure is incredibly solid and holds its shape and functions as some sort of vessel. And I think of my mind and the human mind as the same sort of thing. If the segments are all kind of unconnected, there's really no structure. Once they're connected in a way that creates coping mechanisms for yourself and how you interact with the world and how the world interacts with you, it becomes a solid foundation and a solid structure. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. What a remarkable process.
Thanks.
It's very very layered and involved. It's amazing. Have you done this kind of creation and recreation before, creating fragments from holes and recombining? Is this?
Well, what I showed you was a series, and that developed out of an unfortunate accident I had, and with a tremendously positive result. And so that's where it came from. And then it just self-evolved. So I went through part of the process and really dug it. I really enjoyed that and said, well, what else can I do? And it just evolved from that until the culmination of the whole idea of seeking out form and segmenting it and then stitching it back together was the torso.
Right.
The process with the torso.
Speaking of the stitching, Linda has a question of how did you sew the pieces together?
So once the shapes were next to the the contiguous shapes, the shapes around it, I measured half inch or quarter inch in either direction, drilled holes across from each other. So and the holes are large enough that I could insert seine line, and seine line is used to tie together netting for fishing. So large nets, and it's incredibly strong. It's infused with a hot process with tar, which vulcanizes or increases the strength. It's cotton string basically, but with that heat process with tar, it makes it incredibly strong. So I'm pulling with all my might with actually with pliers. Wow. To knot these things together. And part of that is that since there's the paper dam around everything, if you accumulate that over the entire torso, you're going to lose a lot of volume. So I have to custom fit each piece. It's always somewhat inaccurate. And so I'm pulling with these sutures to bring those pieces together. And again, the structure, once that's done, is incredibly strong.
Just I bet. Wonderful. I got to get some of that line. I want to try some of that.
Well, I got tons of it.
Some, Michael? I'd like to use some of that. It's remarkable to me the strength of will it takes to go through a process like this and to kind of bend the world to your vision and then to take it apart and rebuild it again, and even the physical strength it requires. And when you look at Greg's work, there's some similarities and differences. And I'm curious, Greg, how would you contrast your approach of taking a raw material and hammering it into existence? I guess just if you can answer to us what that's like in your head. Do you see this first and then form it, or is it improvisational?
Well, it can be both, but if we're looking at this dipper, I've been doing dippers for a long time, and they
How
are.
Big is this, Greg?
What?
How big is this dipper? Is it this big?
No, it's 41 inches long. It's a big one. I think it's 41, something like that.
Right.
So I've been doing dippers for a long time. I started out, see if I'm going to answer this question right. My father-in-law died at 57. That was like 40 years ago. He grew up by this stream. I made a dipper for him in death, or for anybody else that would use it to drink from that stream. And I just love them. And I think they're such a great Oregon item. At least we're supposed to have a lot of rain here. April wasn't too good. So just the idea of dippers in Oregon, I think they go together. And these are my signature pieces. And I've done, I don't know how many, hundreds probably. These are at least 100, probably more like 200 of them over the 40 years I've been doing this. There's 10 of them in my show this time. And these two, the last two we've seen are big ones, and I've done them bigger, but not much. And these are supposed to be a male and a female. This is the female one, and the male one is the first one we saw there. And we got, to me, this one's a more male image than the other one. The other one, fallopian tubes, and actually octopus going on in there too. So I do them a bit intuitively and whack on them until I like them, put them away for a while, look at them some more and maybe alter them until I like them even better. Now, Michael, I mean, we both cut out stuff. I pretty much do everything in just one piece of material that I'm cutting out from a flat sheet of copper, brass, sometimes some silver. And that's what we're seeing here. Sometimes I put things together. The people that know my work, I do some wreaths. And I've done some 10-foot tall pieces out of mini pieces. This particular medium, you can only buy this stuff I've seen them 4x8 sheets like plywood of copper and beat them up. And what I do is actually fairly large for this particular medium because I'm doing them out of one piece. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. How many hours go into one of these?
One of these guys?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't measure this one, but I would say maybe like 20, something like that. And that doesn't count the time I'm just looking at it, or it's around me when I'm working on something else and I'm looking at it and seeing how can that be better? How can it hang off the wall better? How can it fill the space better?
It's very conversational.
It is. And functionality, there is some. Michael and I kind of have that from the fine craft world a little, I would say. Would you say that, Michael?
Oh yeah, I agree completely.
So functionality of things that enters into it, and but not always. The majorest piece of this particular show, I think we'll probably see that later. I see it underneath the green things, not them, but the next. This thing is a large piece, and it's a lot of work. Who knows how many hours of work? I have no idea. 500,000, something like that.
Wow.
There's a lot of pieces in there. And I worked on this really over 3 years. Mostly because I didn't know what I was doing exactly, and it finally came together. And because of the pandemic, I have finished it finally and named it Trapped, and in parentheses, Together. And so that's kind of what I have felt we've been doing through this COVID thing. We're sort of trapped. Both Michael and I have got some spousal things where our wives are not what, I don't know how to say it exactly. They both have some bad things.
Health challenges
come their way, and health challenges, yes. So that's another part of this trapped thing. when you, well, we're taking care of our spouses. That's, I mean, we're in our mid 70s and things like this happen. So,
Well, and our spouses are trapped too.
yes,
They're
absolutely.
trapped in their condition.
And that's part of the together thing, but it goes beyond that, I think, too.
Yep.
Waterstone, limited hours, we're not meeting together, which Waterstone can be a family. And it has been a family of artists, a good stable of artists. And we get to see each other on Zoom. Well, that's what it's come down to. I don't like it. And it's going to change back. So there we go. Now there's another view of this piece too. I think we have it. Do we have it, Corey?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah. So there again, there's really two major pieces in here, but there's other stuff all around. And that piece is, and I don't have the measurements. I think it's 37 by 31 or something like that. Arnon Karmatsuff has done all the forged iron work in this show. I go there and he's got a great studio and we're pretty good friends. And I use him once in a while. And I sort of tell him what to do, and he's got great tools, power hammers and stuff. So we can put things together. I don't think I have any other pictures here that I included that has his work in it, but there's things at the gallery now, and I've used them for 20 years and vice versa. So.
And like Michael's work, I'm sorry I keep explaining your work in terms of Michael's, but he went first and I'm still recovering from his process. But like his work, form is so important to what you have going on. And just look at the forms in here. It's so symphonic. Just
yeah.
gorgeous.
And you know, it's well, Michael's down to veneer, and that's kind of sheet work too. So
right.
In a way, doing that, I'm making more form because I'm hammering things out of very malleable metals, copper and brass for the most part. There's one little chunk of silver hanging off of this. So I'm exploiting the malleability of this copper and non-ferrous metals, and you can do that with ferrous metals too, but it's much easier this way. You know, I don't need to have a big shop, so I can do this fairly limited space, really.
Can we see your right arm?
Pardon?
Can we see your right arm?
Oh, well, it isn't what it's been.
Seems like it would be pretty well developed. It'd be like a crab.
I'm an old jock, and I actually did a lot of weight training until I was 50, and I gave it up about 50. So things change when you don't follow through with.
Right. That's good. But you have this.
But I can still pound a long time, and I have never seen anybody that can outwork me on this particular medium anyway. So there you go.
So Greg, this is your best piece, I think.
Forever?
It's the strongest piece I've seen. I love it. I want it.
Well, Michael, it's for sale.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Waterstone Gallery, yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk later, Greg.
He wants to trade me for others. I've got too much art, and we all do.
We all do. We all have too much.
Yeah, I don't have room, any more room.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Michael.
Yes, it is gorgeous. I agree. And in the poem, the Oblations poem, sound is mentioned, and sound really enters into my experience of Greg's work. I hear the ping of the hammer when I see it. There's something musical about that. You can catch the rhythm. There's rhythms in the the divots that the hammer makes. So there's some rhythmic aspect to it.
Yeah, there is, and this can be a meditative thing too.
I imagine.
It almost has to be to keep going on it, because there's a lot of hours. I see
really grounding.
Well, it's magical too. So the intuitive thing, when you hear about the process of what Greg does, you think that he is smashing and thinning, but it's just the opposite. He is pushing. He's pushing this metal into shape. So when he hits with a hammer, he's not spreading the metal in all directions, away from the peen or the hit. He's pushing it. He's pushing it in the direction he wants it to go. So the edges, the top edges of these pod pieces, that's the exterior of what, maybe a 6 or 8 or 10-inch disc. He's pushing the outside of this flat disc into a shape that now is maybe 3/4 of an inch across or 1/2 inch across. And I've seen pieces where it is so small, it's like 1/4 of an inch hole.
Wow.
There's one piece in this show now called One Trick Pony, and basically that's what I am, one trick pony. Is this thing over and over and over again, and that is about as extreme as small a little deal as I've ever done.
It is amazing, the process. I mean, when you watch him doing it, you think he's destroying this piece of material, but he's coaxing it. He's guiding it. He's pushing it into a form. Just
destruction and
amazing.
creation. That level of energy.
Michael did this one time. I think just one time. We do this thing called Frogwood, which is a collaboration event, and when there's idle time, Michael would sneak over and hammer on a little bit. So he has experience in it. It's really nice. And I got to teach this a lot. I think it's magic too. When I first saw it, I didn't believe it was possible. And that was 40 some years ago. So 45 years ago.
It's like you shape the metal as if it was fluid, as if it was clay.
Yeah.
It's just a different time scale.
It's really, it's like a pinch pot type thing, but you don't get to add clay. That's related.
That's a good point. And I was looking at the chat. Very good. People are impressed, Greg.
Yeah.
And this, obviously form is your jam and your forms are breathtaking, but then there's also, you see it here too, there's a play of color. One of these shots, there's even like this little purple showing up here, and then the obvious patina on this, which adds a whole other dimension to what is otherwise very tactile and form-oriented experience. How do you achieve this color vibe? It looks like you put it outside to age for a century.
Well, the color, probably wouldn't do that in a century. Probably go kind of gray-green. But I have used the same like 5 acids from the start that I've been doing this, and I learned them in school. I haven't really changed too much. Silver nitrate is the only one. But the colors come from a patina agent. The greens that you see here are from copper nitrate, which is basically copper dissolved in nitric acid and then dried out, and the crystals that are formed are then mixed with water. And then I put them in a spray bottle and heat up the different pieces that I'm applying it to 212, which is Fahrenheit, which is where the water, when I spray it on there, the water evaporates off and leaves a deposit of this green color, which is the copper nitrate. There's somewhat of a chemical bond with the and a molecular bond with the copper itself, but it's not that strong. It's definitely on the surface. Now, but this particular green, I don't like just the blue green. I try to come and get a little more green, which I add a ferric nitrate. It's iron that's involved in nitric acid, same process, and it's sort of a yellow brown. So you can see that in there. And then these particular pieces are a little bit of undershine there because I use silver nitrate, which is silver dissolved in nitric acid, and then same kind of process. So I'll mix them all together. And then because copper nitrate especially wants water, then I apply first a very thin sheet of an acrylic lacquer of some type, and then I wax them, and it stays on there. They're not that rugged. Gotta be, they're semi-rugged.
I describe myself that way.
They will scrape off just like paint will. Michael's paint that he uses, the milk paint, is water soluble. These aren't, and probably harder. The milk paint's pretty hard, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah, it's milk protein. It's casein. It's casein, and casein was used as a glue. Probably glued together a lot of World War II warplanes. It's an amazingly tenacious material and has been used for thousands of years. So as a glue and also as a medium for paint.
So can you explain for a second how you built this beautiful yellow and what the materials are?
Sure. So everything that I paint starts with a red base, and that, the red that you see on the inside.
Yeah.
But the entire thing is painted red. It creates a primer coat, but it also creates a color that I know is going to come through. So down by the figure's left foot, you can see kind of a reddish orange coming through that yellow. Whether I'm using blues or greens or browns, that red always comes through, and it kind of warms things up. You don't really see it. It becomes kind of background, but it warms the last color that's on there. In fact, you can see it in some of the green too.
Yeah, I see it there.
Then milk paint is an inherently crude substance, and I revel in that. So I'm not sanding in between coats. I'm trying to put in as many brush strokes as possible as I layer color, because the very last thing I do is I paint it black. I do a black wash over everything, and anywhere there's an incised cut, that's how the figures are defined, or a brush stroke, or a beveled edge around the sewing holes, black gathers, and then I sand through the black. So it's an additive subtractive process that it makes the colors pop.
You don't do anything simply, Michael.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, this is a very simple process. I'm not going back and individually marking the black stuff. That it's
relatively
there, and I'm sanding the crap, that I don't want off, and the little black marks just kind of show everything.
How do you sand the black off without digging into the yellow?
It's a matter of fineness of sandpaper. So I don't use anything finer than 220 grit, and I can go up to 600 grit sandpaper. Wow. It starts polishing the surface, and then I finish polishing the surface with 4/0 steel wool and a dark wax. And the dark wax, again, kind of makes everything warm and brings the color out, but also highlights the shapes that I've created by incise carving the forms onto the surface.
Paint is made from milk?
Well, it's everything is taken out except for the milk protein, casein. And then calcium carbonate, which is a whiting. Whiting is used in gesso. It's a builder. It kind of gives the paint body. And then I used to make my own milk paint, but God, what a lot of work. They're really simple ingredients, but it's just a lot of work to get a consistent color. So now I'm using, for my pigments, I use fluid acrylics. Fluid acrylics have a high concentration of pigment to a low concentration of acrylic media. And I've even found places where I can get matte fluid acrylic. Milk paint is a very opaque matte medium.
Right.
And if you don't sand it and polish it, it's gritty. You can run your finger across it, it feels like sand. So if you use regular acrylic, it introduces kind of a plasticky feel to the milk paint, but using matte fluid acrylic, it's the same sheen, the same opacity as the milk paint itself. So it works really well together. And plus I can do any freaking color I want to.
Right.
The milk paint company that I get the milk paint from has colors, and they're traditional, colonial kind of colors, but you can't mix them. You can't get certain colors. And I just order the base and I put in my own colors. It's a wonderful medium, just gorgeous.
Really amazing. Oh, gentlemen, this has been so inspiring to see your approaches of getting to the light. And it seems that both of you are really expressing interiority in your work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some mimesis of the real world, as it were, but that's only to serve this, expressing something. And has that always been your mode?
Greg?
Yeah. Yeah, probably. Yeah. You come from a fine craft, fine art mix, trying to figure out how to market it and how to express yourself the best you can, and how to try to keep doing it and making sense of how much money you're making at it and actually doing it. And we both teach, so that's helped us over the get going on it. And then Michael's been a furniture maker. I have painted a lot of houses and roofed a lot of houses to keep going, and had a wife that had a real job. So that's just keep doing it. I did an awful lot of craft shows all over the nation for the first 25 years I did this. So you jury for things, and you have to satisfy what the jurors are looking at to get into things. So there's that game. And I sort of was in a place where people mostly were making things so they could make money at it. And I haven't really had to do that very much. So I've tried to be more expressive and go with intuition and making things that I like more than this will sell. If that answers the question too, I think it kind of does.
So as a furniture maker, I was frustrated because I felt limited by the idea, limited by the fact that it had to interact with humans in a functional way. And I kept introducing curves and lines and on square boxes, which was excruciatingly painful. It was like, why are you doing this? And then I met a guy who was making furniture, excuse me, but what he was doing was carving into the surface and using milk paint. And my mind just went, oh my God, really? Because he was making gorgeous forms with sumptuous color. And I just, yes, and yes. So I started making furniture that was painted, and I immediately went to artists like, God, what is that guy's name? The guy that does really simple line drawings, and not Monet. And anyway, and I started putting those kinds of images on my work. The guy that influenced me was very geometric. He would cut straight lines, turn circles and round shapes, and then meticulously color the different forms that he created. I, on the other hand, was more interested in the work that I was trying to do as portraiture. So whether there was an actual figurative form somehow put on the surface, or the thing that I was making represented, you know, personality or some sort of characteristic, or yeah, that kind of stuff. And then I just completely got away from furniture. Just went,
Wow.
I'm, you know, I can do so much more with masks and carving flat surfaces with imagery. And well, eventually I met a coffin maker in Ghana who was, his grandfather started the whole design coffin building in Ghana, that I was finding online and going, oh, this is nuts. This is incredible. These are hollow frickin' sculptures that
Wow.
they're creating out of wood. And so I met this guy. I got in contact with him and spent a summer with him. And just my life has been completely changed ever since. And his too, by golly. He came to the United States, met a woman, got married, has a beautiful little son, 5 years old, and he's living in Madison, Wisconsin, of all places.
Corey, you're going to get to meet him too at Frogger.
Yeah, he's coming for the
That's
collaborative.
really exciting. I'm excited to go.
Yep.
Wow. I love how both your stories start in a more craft functional world, and you get pulled into the light.
Yep.
Making useless things.
Yep.
Which is so much nobler somehow.
Yep.
Well,
it's all process. It comes from process, both of us. It's just that we kind of left a lot of functionality by the wayside.
right. But there's still some in there, certainly more than.
Yes, always references,
right.
for sure.
My stuff holds water for the most part.
Ha.
And mine doesn't, because it's sewn together.
You said you were a one-trick pony, but you're also a comedian.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is. All right, folks. Are there any questions from participants? I feel it is time to wrap up. I've learned my head is swimming with possibilities. I feel like I'm immediately going to go make milk paint.
What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I would have lots of questions. I mean, there's only one other person, Gail Yamashita, who's not an artist associated with the Waterstone, but I will look forward to seeing more of your work, Michael, and Greg, and you know, continuing my own conversations with you. You know, I know that these are only scheduled to last for an hour, and I probably would have an hour's worth of questions in
Right. Well, swing on by the gallery, Tim, when you're back.
I won't be able to do that until I get back to Portland in a couple of weeks' time. But now the current show, Oblations, finishes at the end of May, does it?
Yes, it does.
Unfortunately, I won't be back until early June. What is the next show, out of curiosity?
For us, or the next show for?
Well, the next show at the Waterston.
Lisa.
It's Lisa Onstead.
Oh yeah, I love her work, so I'll definitely be coming in. But anyway, I don't want to fill the last part of your recording with sort of comments that aren't really relevant to the sort of the wonderful information that I've received from this talk. I don't think I'd appreciate your work, Michael, as much, which as a very conceptual art component to it. I don't think I would appreciate it as much if I hadn't heard some of the background to it. I know that in some ways, you know, everyone approaches and interprets and enjoys and understands a piece of art from their own standpoint and their own context, but sometimes you really have to know the context in which the artist is creating something to have a better appreciation of it. So that's my That's my take on it.
Well, thank
And
you.
as a former geologist that's worked with stone and metals, I'm particularly fond of those sculptural media that involve stone, or in this case, copper and Greg's work. And I've purchased a equatorial equinox number 10 from Dave Hazlett, and I love that piece. And it was only through doing a little interview with him on a smaller piece of his that I purchased that I sort of kept looking at this larger piece in the background and thought, oh, I really like that. It's starting to speak to me, and it finally spoke so loudly and then demanded that I buy it that I did. So that's quite
beats you
often the
into speech.
evolution of an art addict such as myself. I'm not an artist, but I've grown to appreciate more the work of artists and understand why particular pieces communicate with me. And so that, I think that dialogue is as important for an art addict as it is for the artist. That's,
Oh yeah.
What are you creating, and what has the artist created, and how and why does that speak to you?
Right.
But anyway, that's it's become something of an obsession of mine. So I'll attend as many of these artist talks as I can, because I
Very
get
healthy
a
obsession.
huge amount out of them.
Yeah.
So thank you all for
Thank you, Tim.
producing
you,
these.
Tim.
And I've probably spoken more than I need to now. So I'll let you wrap up, or whatever you do as the master of ceremonies, Corey, to wind up this month's talk.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you, Tim, very much.
yes, and thank you guys, Michael and Greg, for your candor and sharing with us your generosity and your really inspiring approach.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
It's really touching.
Thanks a lot.
All right, folks, I'm going to close
Yeah.
it. Bye.
You all.